The stars had never seemed so close yet so distant. Ambassador Chen Wei stood before the observation deck of the UES Endeavour, watching the swirling colors of the nebula beyond. 43 years had passed since humanity discovered faster-than-light travel, and now finally they were about to meet someone else among the stars. The communication had come 3 months ago. A simple message in mathematical sequences, then images, then sounds. Another civilization existed out here and they wanted to talk. Chen Wei had spent her entire life preparing for this moment, studying languages, cultures, and the art of diplomacy. She was 62 years old, and this would be the pinnacle of her career. "Ambassador, they're responding to our coordinates," Captain Maria Santos said from behind her. "They'll be here within the hour." Chen Wei nodded, smoothing down her formal diplomatic robes. The United Earth Space Command had chosen traditional Chinese dress for this meeting, a symbol of Earth's oldest continuous civilization. She hoped it would convey respect and history to whoever came through that darkness. When the Concordate ship arrived, it was unlike anything humanity had imagined. The vessel was massive, easily 3 times the size of the Endeavour, and it seemed to be made of a crystalline substance that shifted colors in the starlight. As it drew closer, smaller ships detached from it, 7 in total, each representing a different species. The meeting took place in a neutral area, a specially constructed platform that floated in space between the 2 flagships. Chen Wei brought a team of 20, including scientists, linguists, and military advisors. When the airlock opened and the aliens stepped through, she felt her heart race with excitement and fear. The first being was tall, nearly 3 meters, with blue-gray skin and 4 arms. Its head was elongated and its eyes were large and dark. It wore robes of deep purple and carried no visible weapons. Behind it came creatures of various shapes and sizes. One looked like a floating jellyfish made of light. Another was insectoid, with black chitinous armor and mandibles that clicked constantly. A third resembled a bear covered in silver fur. The tall being spoke, and the translation device humanity had prepared crackled to life. "I am High Mediator Zalthor of the Galactic Concordat. We represent 47 civilized species. You are the humans of Earth?" Chen Wei stepped forward, bowing slightly. "I am Ambassador Chen Wei, representing the United Earth government. We come in peace and friendship." Zalthor's expression was unreadable. Peace and friendship. Curious concepts from such a young species. "Tell us, humans, how long have you traveled the stars?" 43 years, Chen Wei replied honestly. There was a ripple among the alien delegates, something that might have been laughter or dismissal. Zalthor tilted his head. 43 years. We have been traveling for 43,000. Your species is an infant taking its first steps. The word stung, but Chen Wei maintained her composure. Then perhaps we have much to learn from our elders. Over the following weeks, humanity learned about the Galactic Concordat. It was an alliance of species that controlled nearly 60,000 star systems. They had laws, trade agreements, and a military force that maintained order. They had seen empires rise and fall, watched species evolve and go extinct. To them, humanity was a curiosity, nothing more. Admiral Sarah Kozlov, commander of Earth's defense fleet, attended many of these meetings. She was a tall woman with steel-gray hair and sharp green eyes. Unlike Chen Wei, she did not trust the Concordat immediately. "They look at us like we're children," she told Chen Wei after one particularly condescending session. "Or worse, like we're pets. They're cautious," Chen Wei argued. "We would be too if a new species suddenly appeared with weapons and ships." "We don't have weapons compared to them," Kozlov replied. "Did you see their warships? They could glass Earth in an hour." Despite the Admiral's concerns, humanity pushed forward with integration. The Concordat offered humanity provisional membership, a status that would allow Earth to establish colonies and engage in limited trade. In exchange, humanity would need to share their technology and follow Concordat law. Dr. Marcus Webb, Earth's leading xenobiologist, was thrilled. He was a short, energetic man in his 40s with wild brown hair and an infectious enthusiasm. "Do you understand what this means?" he told anyone who would listen. "We'll have access to 47 different biologies, 47 different evolutionary paths. The medical advances alone could extend human life by centuries." Captain James Rodriguez was less impressed. Known as Reaper among his fellow soldiers, he commanded the elite Special Operations Unit of Earth's military. He was a quiet man, broad-shouldered and scarred, with dark eyes that missed nothing. When he attended briefings about the Concordat, he always sat in the back and said little. But he watched everything. One evening, Rodriguez approached Admiral Kozlov in her office. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am?" "Always, Captain. I don't like this. Any of this." Rodriguez leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "I've been reviewing the Concordat's history, what they've shared with us. Every species that joined them did so peacefully, they say. But I found references to 3 species that aren't members anymore. They could have left voluntarily," Kozlov suggested, "or they could have been removed. We don't know, and nobody will talk about it." Rodriguez pushed off the wall. "I'm recommending we keep our most advanced military technology classified. Don't share everything." Kozlov considered this. "The Council wants full cooperation. The Council doesn't have to fight if things go wrong. We do." Rodriguez met her eyes. "Trust is earned, Admiral. They haven't earned ours yet." But the United Earth Council was eager to prove humanity's worth. Over the next 10 years, Earth shared technology freely. They gave the Concordat their advances in medical nanobots, which could repair tissue damage at the cellular level. They shared agricultural techniques that could make desert planets bloom. They even shared their art, music, and literature, hoping to bridge the cultural divide. The Concordat accepted everything and gave little in return. They provided maps of local space and basic trade agreements, but their advanced technology remained locked away. When human scientists asked about their faster-than-light communication systems or their energy shields, they were told such things were not appropriate for provisional members. Chen Wei tried to remain optimistic, but even she noticed the pattern. The Concordat species rarely visited Earth, and when they did, they treated humans with barely concealed contempt. She overheard a Vorath officer, one of the insectoid species, speaking to his companion in what he thought was a private moment. The translator caught his words. "Such weak creatures. They smile and bow while we take everything they have. When will they realize they are nothing but resources to be exploited?" The words haunted her. But when she brought her concerns to the Council, they dismissed them. "We must be patient," they told her. "We must prove ourselves worthy of full membership." Humanity began establishing colonies with Concordat permission. Each world required extensive paperwork and fees paid to the Concordat administration. Earth paid in technology and resources, always hoping the next payment would bring them closer to acceptance. The colony on Proxima Centauri became humanity's crown jewel. It was an Earth-like world orbiting Proxima Centauri, humanity's nearest stellar neighbor. Within 20 years, 2 million humans called it home. Within 40 years, that number grew to 2,300,000,000. Dr. Webb moved to Proxima Centauri to establish a xenobiology research center. He married, had 3 children, and thought he had found paradise. "This is what we were meant for," he told his wife Elena as they watched their children play in the purple grass of their new world. Humanity was meant to spread among the stars. Admiral Kozlov, now in her 70s but still sharp as ever, maintained Earth's defense fleet. She had been arguing for years that humanity needed better weapons, better shields, better everything, but the Council insisted their resources go toward colony development instead. "We're not at war with anyone," they told her. "We're members of a galactic community now." "Provisional members," Kozlov always corrected them. "We're provisional members. We have no votes, no rights, and no protection guaranteed under Concordat law." Captain Rodriguez, now Major Rodriguez, continued his work in silence. He had been recruiting the best soldiers humanity had to offer and training them in unconventional warfare. When questioned about why he was preparing for guerrilla tactics and asymmetric combat, he simply said, "Hope for the best, prepare for the worst." By the year 2389, 42 years after first contact, humanity had 23 colony worlds. Earth's population had grown to 16 billion, spread across the solar system and beyond. Humans served on Concordat trade vessels, worked in Concordat facilities, and studied at Concordat universities. Many believed integration was nearly complete. Ambassador Chen Wei, now 104 years old and kept alive by Concordat medical technology, attended a ceremony on Earth. The Concordat was finally going to vote on granting humanity full membership. She had worked her entire life for this moment. The vote was scheduled for the following month. Chen Wei allowed herself to believe finally that humanity had proven itself. They had been peaceful, generous, and patient. Surely that would be enough. On Proxima Centauri, Dr. Webb celebrated his 68th birthday surrounded by his children and grandchildren. His research facility had made breakthrough after breakthrough, curing diseases that had plagued humanity for millennia. He went to bed that night content, thinking about the presentation he would give the next day on his latest discovery. Admiral Kozlov sat in her office aboard the orbital defense station above Earth, reviewing reports. Something felt wrong. There had been unusual movements of concordate ships near human space, more military vessels than usual. She sent a message to Rodriguez, now a colonel commanding Earth's Special Forces. "Stay alert. Something's coming." Rodriguez received the message while training a new batch of recruits. He looked up at the stars and felt that old familiar feeling, the one he had learned to trust in combat. Danger was coming. He just didn't know from where. In the Concordate High Council chambers, millions of light years away, the vote was taking place early. Not about granting humanity membership, but about removing them entirely. The Vorath representative stood before the council, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction. "The humans have shared much technology with us," he said. "We have studied them carefully. They are adaptable, creative, and dangerously sentimental. If allowed to grow stronger, they will challenge our authority. I propose we implement preventive sterilization protocol. For the safety of the Concordate, the human infestation must be cleansed." High Mediator Zalthor, who had met Chen Wei all those years ago, cast his vote with the others. It was unanimous. The humans would be eliminated, and their worlds would be redistributed among deserving Concordate species. The fleet was already on its way. 2,000 warships, the largest military force assembled in Concordate history, traveling through faster than light toward human space. Their first target was Proxima Centauri. On Earth, Chen Wei received a message requesting her presence at an emergency council meeting. She thought perhaps the vote had been moved up. That good news was coming early. She smiled as she put on her formal robes. In orbit above Proxima Centauri, Dr. Webb's daughter called him in a panic. "Dad, there are ships appearing in orbit." "Lots of ships. They're not responding to hails." Admiral Kozlov's warning klaxons began blaring across every human facility simultaneously. Her screens lit up with red alerts, ships, hundreds of ships, thousands of ships, all broadcasting Concordate identification codes. Colonel Rodriguez grabbed his weapon and began running toward the command center, already knowing somehow that he was too late. That they were all too late. And in that moment, as Concordate weapons powered up above 23 human worlds, humanity's age of extended hands came to an end. The first strike came without warning, without declaration, without mercy. Dr. Marcus Webb was in his laboratory when the sky began to burn. He had been examining a sample under his microscope, completely absorbed in his work, when his assistant burst through the door screaming. Through the window he saw streaks of light falling from the heavens like deadly rain. "Get to the shelters," someone yelled in the hallway. Webb stood frozen, watching as those streaks of light touched the horizon. Where they landed, the world exploded. Fireballs rose kilometers into the air, and the shock waves that followed shattered windows across the city. Webb's hands shook as he grabbed his communication device. Elena, where are you?" His wife's voice came through, broken by static. "Marcus, I have the children. We're heading to Shelter 7. Where are you?" "I'm at the lab." "I'm coming. Stay safe, I'm coming." He ran for the door, but before he reached it, another wave of strikes hit closer. The building shook and Webb fell to his knees. Through the window he saw entire city blocks vanishing in clouds of fire and debris. Above Proxima Centauri, the Concordate fleet had positioned itself in perfect formation. 200 warships surrounded the planet, their weapons charged and ready. On the flagship, Vorath Commander Zekthar watched the bombardment with satisfaction. His species had waited decades for this moment. "Target the population centers first," he ordered. "Then the agricultural zones. Leave nothing that can sustain life. The Concordate has decreed this world be cleansed." His weapons officer hesitated for just a moment. "Commander, there are evacuation ships launching from the surface. Do we engage?" Zekthar's mandibles clicked in what passed for a smile among his kind. "Destroy them all. No humans can escape to spread word of their fate. This must appear complete." In orbit, 36 civilian transport ships desperately tried to break through the blockade. They were cargo haulers, passenger liners, and personal shuttles, anything that could carry people away from the dying world. Most were destroyed within minutes of launch. Their shields, designed for asteroid deflection, crumpled like paper against military-grade weapons. But some survived. Captain Sarah Chen, commanding a massive ore hauler called the Prometheus, pushed her engines beyond their limits. Her ship carried 15,000 refugees crammed into cargo holds designed for rocks and metal. Around her, other ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. All power to forward shields, she screamed at her crew. "Don't stop, don't slow down, just get through." A Concordat frigate moved to intercept, its weapons tracking the Prometheus. But before it could fire, another human ship, a small personal yacht, rammed into the frigate's sensor array. The impact destroyed both vessels, but it gave the Prometheus the seconds it needed to break through the blockade and jump to faster-than-light speed. Captain Chen watched Proxima Centauri shrink behind them, its surface now glowing with the heat of planetary bombardment. Beside her, her first officer wept openly. They had escaped, but they had left 2 billion people behind to die. On the surface, Dr. Webb ran through streets that were no longer recognizable. Buildings he had passed every day for 20 years were gone, replaced by smoking craters. Bodies lay everywhere, some intact, others not. He kept his eyes forward, searching for Shelter 7. He found it collapsed. The bunker had taken a direct hit. Its reinforced roof caved in, buried under tons of rubble. Webb fell to his knees beside the ruins, clawing at the debris with his bare hands. "Elena! Kids, can you hear me?" He screamed until his voice was raw, but there was no answer. There would never be an answer. Around him, Proxima Centauri died. The bombardment continued for 6 hours straight. Cities vanished, forests burned, oceans boiled. By the time the Concordat fleet ceased fire, the planet's surface temperature had risen 40 degrees. Nothing could survive what they had done. Commander Zekthar reviewed the damage reports with approval. "Excellent work. Move to the next target. We have 22 more human colonies to cleanse." But the Vorath commander had made one mistake. In his eagerness to ensure complete destruction, he had left 3 monitoring satellites active to record the annihilation for the Concordat archives. What he did not know was that a human engineer named David Park had been hiding in one of those satellites, performing routine maintenance when the attack began. Park watched the genocide unfold below him, unable to look away, unable to help. He recorded everything. Every ship, every weapon strike, every war crime. And when the Concordat fleet finally moved on, he transmitted his recordings on every frequency he could access, sending them out into the darkness of space. One of those transmissions reached Earth. Admiral Sarah Kozlov was in Earth's orbital command center when the alert came. She had been coordinating the defense of humanity's homeworld against the approaching Concordat fleet. Earth's defenses were stronger than Proxima's, but they were still hopelessly outmatched. "Admiral, incoming transmission from Proxima Centauri," her communications officer said, his face pale. It's bad, ma'am." Kozlov watched the footage in silence. She saw the bombardment, saw the cities burning, saw the evacuation ships being destroyed like insects. She saw 2 billion human beings erased from existence in a single day. When the recording ended, she sat motionless for a full minute. "How long until the Concordat fleet reaches Earth?" she finally asked. 18 hours, ma'am." Kozlov stood up, her face like carved stone. "Send a priority alert to all human vessels, all colonies, all stations. Transmit the Proxima recording. Everyone needs to know what's coming." She turned to her tactical officer. "How many ships do we have?" 347 combat-capable vessels, Admiral. Against their projected force of 800 plus. "We can't win," someone whispered. Kozlov's eyes were cold. "No, we can't. But we can make them bleed for what they've done." She pulled up the defense grid. "Concentrate all firepower on their command ships. If we're going to die, we take their commanders with us." Across human space, the recordings from Proxima Centauri spread like wildfire. On 19 other colonies, the same scene was playing out. Concordat fleets appeared without warning and began bombardment. Some colonies had more time than others to evacuate. Some had none at all. On New Harmony, a farming colony of 50 million, the governor ordered every ship to evacuate the children first. 6 million kids under the age of 12 were loaded onto colony ships while their parents stayed behind to face the bombardment. Most of those children would be orphans before the day ended. On Arcturus Station, a mining facility deep in an asteroid field, Colonel James Rodriguez received Admiral Kozlov's transmission. He was visiting the station on an inspection tour when the attack began. He watched the footage from Proxima 3 times, his expression never changing. "Sir, what are your orders?" his second-in-command asked. Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice soft but deadly. "Send word to all Special Forces units. Operation Survival is now active. Go dark, scatter, and wait. If Earth falls, if we all fall, someone has to survive to remember, and someday, somehow, someone has to make them pay." On Earth, Ambassador Chen Wei stood before the United Earth Council as the Concordate fleet entered the solar system. She was no longer the hopeful diplomat who had first greeted the aliens 42 years ago. That woman had died with Proxima Centauri. "They're hailing us," the communications officer reported. "Put them through," Chen Wei said. High Mediator Zalthor appeared on the screen, the same being who had welcomed humanity to the galactic community so long ago. "Ambassador Chen Wei, the Concordate has determined that humanity poses a threat to galactic stability. You will surrender all vessels and submit to preventive sterilization protocol. Resistance will only prolong your suffering." Chen Wei stared at him with eyes full of hate. "You came to us speaking of peace. You took our technology, our trust, our friendship, and now you come to murder us all. Your species is young and does not understand the responsibilities of maintaining order." Zalthor replied calmly. "This is not personal. It is necessary." "Not personal?" Chen Wei laughed, a bitter sound. "You're killing billions of people and it's not personal?" "You are simply resources being reallocated," Zalthor said. "Your worlds will be given to species more deserving. This is the way of the galaxy." Chen Wei looked at the alien who had betrayed everything humanity believed in. She thought of all the years spent trying to prove humanity's worth, all the compromises, all the patience, all of it meaningless. "Then hear this, Zalthor. Hear this and remember it." She leaned close to the camera. "We tried peace. We offered friendship. We gave you everything we had. You chose to destroy us instead." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You chose extinction. Not ours, yours." She cut the transmission and turned to Admiral Kozlov, who had joined her in the council chamber. "Admiral, you have command of Earth's defense. Do what you can." "It won't be enough," Kozlov said quietly. "I know," Chen Wei smiled sadly. "But maybe it will buy time for someone to escape. Someone to survive. Someone to remember. The Battle of Earth lasted 3 days. Admiral Kozlov used every trick she had learned in 50 years of military service. She sacrificed small ships to damage larger ones, used Earth's moon as cover, and targeted the Concordate's command structure relentlessly. Earth's defenders fought with a desperation and ferocity that surprised their attackers. On the first day, humanity destroyed 47 Concordate ships at the cost of 200 of their own. On the second day, they destroyed 23 more. On the third day, Earth's orbital defenses fell and the bombardment began. But Admiral Kozlov had planned for this. While the battle raged, every ship that could be spared had been quietly evacuating people. Not millions, they didn't have time for millions, but thousands. Scientists, soldiers, engineers, children. Anyone who could help humanity survive. These evacuation ships scattered in every direction, jumping to random coordinates, trying to vanish into the vastness of space. Most were hunted down and destroyed, but some, maybe 24, maybe 50, escaped into the darkness. Kozlov remained on Earth's orbital platform to the end. When the Concordate ships finally broke through and began targeting the surface, she sent one final transmission to all remaining human vessels. "This is Admiral Sarah Kozlov, commanding officer of the United Earth Defense Force. Earth is lost. Proxima is lost. 19 colonies are lost. But we are not extinct. Not yet." She paused, looking at the burning planet below. "To all humans still alive out there, remember what they did to us. Remember Proxima Centauri. Remember the 2 billion children they murdered. And when you're ready, when you're strong enough, make them remember it too. Make them regret the day they decided humanity was weak." The platform shook as Concordate weapons tore through its hull. Kozlov gripped her chair and kept talking. "We tried peace. Now you'll witness humanity's revenge." The transmission cut off as the platform exploded. Admiral Sarah Kozlov died with her planet, one of 16 billion casualties in what the Concordate would later call the human cleansing. Across human space, the attacks continued for another week. When they finally stopped, 23 human colonies had been destroyed. Earth was a burning ruin, its atmosphere choked with ash and radiation. Mars, Venus, and the outer colonies in the solar system were bombarded into submission. Of humanity's 18 billion people, Fewer than 4 billion survived. They were scattered across thousands of light years, hiding in the dark spaces between stars, terrified and broken. Commander Zekthar sent his report to the Concordat High Council with pride. The human infestation has been successfully cleansed. Casualties on our side were acceptable. We lost 106 vessels, primarily due to the humans' irrational willingness to sacrifice themselves. The threat has been neutralized. The Concordat celebrated their victory. They redistributed human worlds among loyal species. They destroyed Earth's monuments and erased human culture from their databases. Within a year, it was as if humanity had never existed. But in the darkness between stars, in hidden bases carved into asteroids and rogue planets, the survivors gathered. They watched recordings of the genocide over and over. They memorized the faces of their enemies. They mourned their dead, and they began to plan. Dr. Marcus Webb was among the survivors. He had been pulled from the ruins of Proxima by a rescue ship in the final hours before the planet became completely uninhabitable. He was one of only 300,000 who escaped that world. In a dark bunker on an unnamed asteroid, Webb watched his wife and children die again on a recording someone had salvaged. He watched it until he could no longer cry, until hate was all that remained. Then he began to work. The survivors called them the Dark Years, those first terrible months after the betrayal. 4 billion humans scattered across the galaxy like seeds blown by a violent wind, each group isolated and terrified, certain they were the last of their kind. In the Kepler cluster, Captain Sarah Chen landed her ore hauler Prometheus on a dead moon orbiting a gas giant. The 15,000 refugees she had saved from Proxima Centauri emerged into a world of gray dust and darkness. They had food for 6 months, water for 3, and absolutely no idea what to do next. "We can't stay here," her first officer said, looking at their dwindling supplies. "We can't leave either," Chen replied. "Every time we broadcast a signal, we risk the Concordat finding us. Every time we move, we leave a trail." She looked at the frightened people huddled in the cargo bay. "We're trapped." 3 months later, they received a coded transmission on an emergency frequency. It was a simple message. "Sanctuary exists. Follow the dark path. Look for the red star that isn't red." Chen had no idea what it meant, but it was the first sign they weren't alone. She set her ship's course toward a nebula region where stars appeared red due to dust interference. It took 2 weeks of searching before she found it. A star that appeared red but wasn't. Its true color hidden by a carefully positioned debris field. Behind that debris field, she found a hollowed-out dwarf planet and 36 other human ships. This was the beginning of what would become Sanctuary Prime, the first hidden base of the United Earth Remnant. The person who had built it was someone Chen recognized from the news broadcast before the war. "Admiral Sarah Kozlov, you're supposed to be dead," Chen said when they met in the makeshift command center carved into the rock. Kozlov looked older, her hair now completely white, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. "I was on the orbital platform when it exploded. My security team grabbed me and threw me in an escape pod against my orders. I didn't want to survive while Earth burned." She gestured at the walls around them. "But here I am. And so are you. And so are 3,000 others who found this place." 3,000 out of billions, Chen whispered. 3,000 so far, Kozlov corrected. "I've been sending out coded beacons on old human frequencies. More are coming every day." "We're not extinct, Captain." "Not yet." Over the following years, more survivors found Sanctuary Prime. They came in damaged ships and stolen Concordat vessels, sometimes in nothing more than escape pods. Each brought stories of the genocide, of worlds burning and families lost. Each brought hate. Admiral Kozlov, now calling herself Shadow Admiral to symbolize humanity's new existence in darkness, organized the survivors. She established a council, created supply chains, and began the slow process of rebuilding. But this would not be the peaceful humanity that had sought friendship among the stars. This would be something new, forged in the fires of betrayal. "We have 2 choices," Kozlov told the council in the 3rd year of exile. "We can hide forever, slowly dying out in the darkness. Or we can become strong enough to make them pay for what they did." Colonel James Rodriguez had found his way to Sanctuary Prime 6 months after its founding. He brought with him 300 Special Forces soldiers and a burning determination. "We need to know everything about them," he said. "Their technology, their tactics, their weaknesses. We spent 40 years trying to be friends. Now we spend the next 40 years learning how to kill them." Dr. Marcus Webb arrived at Sanctuary Prime in the second year. He was thin, haunted, and obsessed. The man who had once celebrated the diversity of alien life now studied it only to find ways to destroy it. In a laboratory carved from asteroid rock, he began work on what he called Project Genesis. The concordate species are all adapted to their specific environments, Webb explained to the council. The Vorath need high oxygen atmospheres. The Keltar can't survive in gravity above 1.5 G. The Zareth are sensitive to certain radiation frequencies. He pulled up genetic charts. But humans, we're adaptable. We evolved on a world with extreme climate variation. We can survive almost anywhere. What are you proposing? Kozlov asked. Webb's eyes were cold. I'm proposing we make ourselves even more adaptable. We enhance our genetics, push our bodies beyond normal human limits. The Concordate treated us like weak primitives. Let's show them what primitives can become when you try to exterminate them. The council debated for weeks. Genetic manipulation was controversial, even among those who had survived genocide. But in the end, survival won over ethics. Project Genesis was approved. Webb began with volunteers, soldiers from Rodriguez's unit who were willing to be test subjects. The first experiments were failures, painful and often deadly. But Webb pushed forward, learning from each mistake. He used the alien genetic samples he had collected before the war, combining human DNA with elements from species that had evolved for combat. Speed and resilience. By year 7 of the exile, the first successful Genesis subjects emerged. They called themselves Reapers, after Colonel Rodriguez's old nickname. These enhanced humans could survive in environments that would kill normal people. Their reflexes were 3 times faster, their bones were reinforced with carbon lattice structures, and their neural pathways were optimized for combat thinking. Rodriguez was the first to volunteer for the full treatment. He was 53 years old and the procedure nearly killed him. But when he emerged from the medical pod 3 months later, he was transformed. Faster, stronger, and more dangerous than any normal human had a right to be. How do you feel? Webb asked him. Rodriguez flexed his hands, watching the muscles move under his skin. Like I can finally fight back. The Reaper program expanded. By year 15, there were 5,000 enhanced soldiers. They began training in hidden facilities on dead moons and in asteroid bases. They practiced zero-gravity combat, stealth operations, and guerrilla tactics. They learned to move in silence and strike without mercy. But combat soldiers weren't enough. Humanity needed better technology, better ships, better weapons. The Concordate had a 1,000-year head start in every field. Closing that gap seemed impossible. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A young engineer named Lisa Park, daughter of the man who had recorded Proxima's destruction, discovered something while analyzing salvaged Concordate drives. The aliens' faster-than-light technology left a detectable wake in space-time, like ripples in water. That's how they tracked ships and predicted movements. What if we could eliminate that wake? Park proposed at a council meeting in year 23. What if we could travel faster than light without leaving any trace? That's impossible, another engineer said. The physics don't allow it. The physics they taught us don't allow it, Park corrected. But we're not bound by their rules anymore. She spent 5 years developing what she called the Exodus engine. It worked on principles that violated several laws of concordate physics, which was exactly why the aliens had never considered it. The engine created a bubble of compressed space-time around the ship, allowing it to move between points without actually traveling the distance in between. The first test nearly destroyed the ship. The second test worked for 3 seconds before collapsing. The third test successfully moved a small vessel across 10 light-years without leaving any detectable trace. We can travel invisible, Park reported to Admiral Kozlov. They'll never see us coming. By year 30 of the exile, humanity had established 200 hidden bases across the galaxy. Their population had slowly grown to 6 billion through reproduction and finding scattered survivors. They had new technology, enhanced soldiers, and a unified purpose. But they still weren't ready. The Concordate had millions of ships and trillions of citizens. Humanity had perhaps 5,000 combat vessels, most of them cobbled together from salvage and desperation. We need more time, Kozlov told the council. She was now 120 years old, kept alive by the same life extension technology that had once been a gift from the Concordate. Another 40 years, maybe 50. We can't fight them head on. We need to be smarter, Rodriguez disagreed. His Reapers had been conducting small-scale raids for years, hitting Concordat outposts and making the attacks look like pirate activity or accidents. Every day we wait, they get stronger. Every day we wait, more humans die from despair and suicide. We need to hurt them, soon. Not hurt them, Webb interjected. He looked different now, older but somehow more intense. He had undergone some of the Genesis treatments himself. We need to terrify them. We need them to fear the darkness. We need them to know that something is hunting them but not know what. This became the strategy. For the next 60 years, humanity waged a ghost war. Concordat ships disappeared without a trace. Outposts went silent for no apparent reason. Trade convoys were found drifting empty in space, their crews simply gone. The Concordat blamed pirates, then each other, then mysterious new threats. They never once considered that the humans they had exterminated might be responsible. After all, they had been so thorough. The humans were dead, except they weren't. They were watching, learning, growing stronger in the darkness. Colonel Rodriguez, now General Rodriguez, despite there being no formal rank structure anymore, led the Ghost War. His Reapers were shadows that moved through Concordat space like smoke. They infiltrated stations, gathered intelligence, and occasionally left messages in places only Concordat officers would find. One message left on a Vorath military base simply said, "Proxima Centauri remembers." The base commander reported it to his superiors, who dismissed it as a prank. Dr. Webb's work continued in secret. He had created biological agents tailored to each Concordat species. Not weapons designed to kill, but tools designed to terrify. A virus that caused the Vorath to experience vivid hallucinations of burning planets. A bacteria that made the Keltar lose their sense of direction. A fungal spore that caused the Zareth temporary paralysis. Why not just kill them? Someone asked during a presentation. Webb's smile was cold. Because dead enemies don't suffer. Dead enemies don't feel fear. We want them alive and terrified. By year 90 of the exile, a new generation had been born who had never seen Earth. Children who grew up in asteroid bases and knew only stories of the home world. They were taught the history carefully, shown the recordings of Proxima's destruction, told about the billions of dead. These children grew up hard. They learned to fight before they learned to read. They studied Concordat languages and cultures not out of curiosity, but to better understand their enemies. When they played war games. When they dreamed of revenge. Admiral Kozlov watched this generation with mixed feelings. She was now 150 years old. Her body sustained by increasingly advanced medical technology. She had survived the betrayal, built Sanctuary Prime, and guided humanity through nearly a century of exile. But sometimes she wondered if they were creating something monstrous. "We're teaching children to hate," she confided to Rodriguez one evening. They sat in her office, drinking synthetic alcohol and watching the stars through a viewport. "We're teaching children to survive," Rodriguez replied. He was over 100 himself, kept young by the Genesis enhancements. "Hate is just a tool, a weapon. When this is over, when we've won, maybe we can teach them peace again." "And if we don't win?" Rodriguez looked at her with those cold, enhanced eyes. "Then at least we'll have hurt them. At least they'll know they should have left us alone." In year 98, the Council of Shadows, as they now called themselves, held a vote. The question was simple: were they ready? Lisa Park, now head of the technology division, stood before them. "We have ships that can travel unseen. We have weapons the Concordat has never encountered. We have soldiers enhanced beyond normal human capabilities. Our intelligence network has infiltrated 17 Concordat species. We know their fleet positions, their political structure, and their weaknesses." Dr. Webb added his assessment. "We have biological agents ready for deployment against every major Concordat species. We understand their psychology, their fears, their social structures. We can hurt them in ways they never imagined." General Rodriguez spoke last. "My Reapers are ready. We've trained for this for 100 years. We've waited while our people lived in darkness and fear. It's time to remind the galaxy that humanity exists, and it's time to make them regret what they did to us." Admiral Kozlov, the Shadow Admiral who had survived longer than any human should have, stood before the council. She was tired, so very tired. But when she spoke, her voice was iron. "For 100 years we've hidden. We've prepared. We've mourned our dead and sworn vengeance. The question before us now is simple. Do we remain in the shadows forever? Or do we step into the light and show the Concordat what they created when they tried to exterminate us?" The vote was unanimous. The time for hiding was over. The time for judgment had come. Kozlov gave the order that would change everything. Activate all sleeper agents. Begin Operation Reckoning. Show them what happens when you teach humans that mercy is weakness. Across concordate space, human agents who had been hiding for decades received the signal. Ships left hidden bases, their Exodus engines making them invisible to concordate sensors. Reaper teams moved into position around key targets, and in her office, Admiral Sarah Kozlov sent one message to every human in the remnant. It was the same message she had sent from Earth 100 years before as her world burned. We tried peace. Now you'll witness humanity's revenge. The silent century was over. The war was about to begin. The Voreth homeworld of Krathnor had not experienced war in 3,000 years. It was a fortress world, protected by the most advanced defense network in the Concordate. 12 orbital stations surrounded the planet, each capable of destroying a fleet by itself. The Vorath military command considered their homeworld untouchable. They learned the truth at dawn on the first day of Operation Reckoning. High Commander Zeknar, son of the Zekthar who had orchestrated the human cleansing, awoke to his communication device screaming alerts. He rose from his sleeping chamber, annoyed at being disturbed, and activated the display. Every single orbital defense platform was offline. Not destroyed, not damaged, simply offline, their systems showing nothing but static. This is impossible, Zeknar whispered. He contacted his defense coordinator. What's happening? Report. The coordinator's voice was panicked. Sir, every platform went dark simultaneously 30 seconds ago. We're locked out of their systems. It's like something just turned them off, then turned them back on. We're trying. The systems won't respond. It's like someone replaced our security codes with something else. We can't access our own defenses. Zeknar felt something he had not experienced in his entire life. Fear. The Voreth had conquered 12 species before joining the Concordate. They knew fear only as something they inflicted on others, but now, standing in his command center watching his impenetrable defenses fail, he understood what their victims had felt. Above the planet, ships began appearing. They materialized out of empty space without any of the usual faster-than-light signatures. One moment there was nothing. The next moment there were vessels unlike anything in Concordate databases. They were human ships, but transformed. Dark hulls that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. No running lights, no transponders, no identification markers. They moved with predatory grace, surrounding the planet in perfect formation. Then came the message. It was broadcast on every frequency in every language, impossible to block or ignore, and it began with a sound that made Zeknar's mandibles freeze. The screams of children. They were the recorded screams from Proxima Centauri, from the day the Voreth had bombarded the planet. 2 billion voices crying out in terror and pain, a sound the Voreth commanders had heard before and dismissed as the natural noise of cleansing. But now those screams were accompanied by images. The bombardment of Proxima shown in perfect detail, the evacuation ships being destroyed, children burning, families dying, all of it in high definition, unavoidable. And then a voice spoke over the screams. It was cold, mechanical, empty of all emotion except hate. 100 years ago, you came to Proxima Centauri. You murdered 2,300,000,000 humans. You laughed while children burned. You thought you had exterminated us. You were wrong. The image changed to show a symbol, a clenched fist wrapped in barbed wire surrounded by stars. We are the ghosts of Proxima. We are what remains when you try to destroy what should never be destroyed. And we have returned to teach you a lesson. Zeknar tried to respond, tried to hail the ships, but his communications were jammed. He could only watch as the human vessels moved into position. You taught us that mercy is weakness, the voice continued. You taught us that peace is for fools. You taught us that the galaxy respects only power and fear. Thank you for the lesson. We learned it well. The human ships opened fire, but not on the planet. They targeted the orbital defense platforms, destroying them one by one with weapons that cut through shields like they weren't there. Each platform exploded in a brilliant flash, and with each explosion, Zeknar felt his species' confidence crumble. You have 1 day to consider your sins, the voice said. 1 day to remember what you did. 1 day to fear what comes next. And then we return. And when we do, you will understand what it means to face humanity when we stop pretending to be civilized. The human ships vanished as suddenly as they had appeared. The defense platforms were gone. The homeworld was defenseless. And across Krathnor, the Vorath experienced something their species had not felt in millennia. Vulnerability. The same scene played out across concordate space. 27 major worlds were visited by these ghost ships in the first week. Each received the same message. Each saw their defenses disabled. Each was left unharmed but terrified. The Concordate High Council met in emergency session. High Mediator Zalthor, now ancient and approaching the end of his natural life, addressed the council with shaking hands. "The humans are alive," he said simply. "The species we exterminated has returned, and they're more dangerous than we ever imagined." "That's impossible," a Keltar representative insisted. "We destroyed their worlds. We counted their dead. They're gone." "Then explain the attacks," a Zarath counselor demanded. 27 worlds hit simultaneously. Defense networks disabled without a shot, ships that appear from nowhere. If these aren't humans, what are they? The council dissolved into chaos, species blaming each other, old alliances fracturing. In their arrogance, they had believed the human cleansing was complete. Now they faced an enemy that had spent a century preparing for this moment. General James Rodriguez watched the chaos from a hidden listening post deep in concordate space. He was leading Operation Reckoning from the field, coordinating attacks across 50 light-years. His Reaper teams were everywhere, striking at military targets, sabotaging infrastructure, spreading fear. Phase 1 complete, his second-in-command reported. "We've hit all primary targets. Concordate military readiness is at 60% and dropping. They're pulling back forces to defend their homeworlds." Rodriguez nodded. "Good, scared enemies make mistakes. Begin Phase 2. Phase 2 was psychological warfare on a scale the galaxy had never seen. Human teams infiltrated concordate worlds and began releasing Dr. Webb's biological agents. The agents weren't lethal, but they were effective. On the Vorath homeworld, military commanders began experiencing vivid hallucinations. They saw the ghosts of Proxima's children everywhere, heard their screams in empty rooms. The hallucinations were so real that some commanders took their own lives rather than face them. On Keltar Prime, the species known for their perfect sense of direction suddenly found themselves unable to navigate. Their internal compass, evolved over millions of years, simply stopped working. Ships crashed, vehicles collided, and chaos spread. On Zarath worlds, military personnel woke up paralyzed, unable to move but fully conscious. The paralysis lasted exactly 6 hours, the same amount of time the Vorath had bombarded Proxima Centauri. When it ended, a message appeared on their communication devices. "Now you know how it feels to be helpless." Dr. Webb monitored the effects from his laboratory on Sanctuary Prime. He felt no satisfaction, only cold determination. "Are they suffering?" he asked his assistant. "The reports indicate extreme psychological distress across all affected populations. Their medical facilities are overwhelmed." "Good," Webb said quietly. "My wife suffered. My children suffered. Let them understand what that feels like." But the biological agents were just the beginning. The real terror came from the Reapers. Colonel Sarah Chen, who had saved 15,000 people from Proxima all those years ago, now commanded a Reaper strike team. She had undergone the Genesis treatments in her 60s, transforming from a civilian ship captain into something far more dangerous. Her team infiltrated a concordate military base on a minor world called Talcor. The base housed 3,000 Vorath soldiers and was considered a minor target. Chen and her 12 Reapers entered the base without triggering a single alarm. They moved through the facility like shadows, their enhanced bodies making no sound. They disabled communications, locked down escape routes, and then activated the base's own defense systems against its occupants. When the confusion reached its peak, Chen broadcast a message over the base's internal communications. "This facility has been judged. Your species chose to exterminate humanity. Your species murdered 2 billion people on Proxima Centauri. Your species will now understand fear." Her team didn't kill anyone. They didn't need to. They simply disappeared, leaving the base locked down and the soldiers trapped inside, watching recordings of their own species' war crimes on every screen. By the time concordate forces broke in 3 days later, half the soldiers had suffered complete psychological breakdowns. Stories like this spread across concordate space. Tales of human ghosts that could walk through walls, disable any security, and vanish without a trace. The concordate military, which had been unstoppable for millennia, suddenly found itself afraid of the dark. Admiral Kozlov coordinated the campaign from Sanctuary Prime. She was 152 years old now, sustained by medical technology that was rapidly approaching its limits. She knew she didn't have much time left, but she was determined to see this through. Admiral, we're receiving reports that the Concordat is pulling back forces from the frontier to protect their core worlds, her intelligence officer reported. Our strategy is working. They're becoming defensive. How many casualties on our side? Kozlov asked. Minimal. 17 Reapers killed in action, 3 ships destroyed, against their losses of over 900 military installations disabled, and 15,000 vessels damaged or destroyed. Kozlov nodded slowly. They have the numbers, but we have the fear. They're fighting blind while we see everything. She paused. What about the Vorath fleet that was scrambled to intercept our ships near Krathnor? The intelligence officer's expression darkened. It's gone, Admiral. All 900 ships. Our fleet ambushed them in the Kelos Dark Zone. The Vorath never saw them coming. The Battle of Kelos Dark Zone had been humanity's first major fleet engagement since the war began. The Vorath had assembled 900 warships and sent them to hunt down the human forces that had threatened their homeworld. It was the largest Concordat military operation in 200 years. They jumped into a trap. The Vorath fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel in a region of space thick with dark matter, an area where sensors were naturally disrupted. They expected to find a small human strike force. Instead, they found 300 human warships waiting in perfect ambush positions. The human ships, using their Exodus engines, had arrived days earlier and positioned themselves in the dark matter clouds. When the Vorath fleet appeared, the humans opened fire from every direction at once. The battle lasted 4 hours. Not a single Vorath ship escaped. The humans used weapons the Concordat had never encountered. Missiles that could track through jamming, energy weapons that bypassed shields, and boarding teams of Reapers that systematically captured enemy vessels. When it was over, the humans sent a message to the Concordat High Council. It was a simple video of the battlefield, showing 900 destroyed or captured Vorath ships floating in space. The message had no words, just that image and the symbol of the clenched fist wrapped in barbed wire. The impact on Concordat morale was devastating. If their strongest military force could be destroyed so completely, what hope did anyone else have? Species that had been loyal to the Concordat for thousands of years began reconsidering their allegiances. Some sent secret messages to known human positions, asking about terms of surrender. Others simply declared neutrality and closed their borders. High Commander Zeknar of the Vorath watched the footage of his species' greatest fleet being destroyed and felt something break inside him. His father had led the human cleansing. He had inherited that legacy with pride. Now that legacy was ashes. He did something no Vorath commander had ever done. He sent a message to the humans, broadcasting on all frequencies, hoping they would hear. I am High Commander Zeknar of the Vorath military. My father led the attack on your worlds. I supported that decision. I believed humans were weak and deserved extinction. He paused, his mandibles trembling. I was wrong. We were all wrong. You were not weak. You were merciful, and we mistook that mercy for weakness, the message continued. I cannot undo what my species has done. I cannot bring back your dead. But I can offer this. The Vorath acknowledge our crime. We acknowledge our guilt, and we will face whatever judgment you bring. We will not fight anymore. We will accept our punishment. The message was broadcast across Concordat space, and it changed everything. The species that had been the most bloodthirsty, the most aggressive, the one that had convinced the Concordat to exterminate humanity, had surrendered. Admiral Kozlov received the message and called an emergency council meeting. This is what we wanted, she told the other leaders. We wanted them broken, terrified, and willing to surrender. The question now is, what do we do with victory? General Rodriguez had a different perspective. Victory? We've barely started. Yes, the Vorath surrendered, but what about the other 46 species? What about the ones who voted for our extinction and never said a word of regret? Dr. Webb agreed. If we show mercy now, they'll see it as weakness again. They'll regroup. In 100 years or 1,000, they'll try again. We need to finish this. But others disagreed. Lisa Park, the engineer who had developed the Exodus engine, spoke up. We've made our point. The galaxy knows we survived and that we're dangerous. If we continue killing, we become exactly what they thought we were. Monsters who deserve extinction. The debate raged for hours. Some wanted total victory, the complete subjugation of the Concordat. Others wanted justice but not genocide. Some wanted to become the new rulers of the galaxy. Others just wanted peace at last. Admiral Kozlov listened to all of them, her ancient face showing no emotion. When they finished, she spoke quietly. For 100 years, we've lived for revenge. We've turned ourselves into weapons. We've sacrificed our humanity to become strong enough to hurt those who hurt us. She looked around the room at all these hard, dangerous people who had once been peaceful explorers. The question we must answer now is, are we still human? Or did the Concordat succeed in killing humanity? Did they just do it more slowly than they intended? The room fell silent. I propose this, Kozlov continued. We offer terms. Complete demilitarization of the Concordat, reparations paid to human survivors, and most importantly, the creation of a new galactic order where no species can ever again vote to exterminate another. We become the enforcers of that order, not conquerors, not exterminators, but protectors. We make sure what happened to us never happens to anyone else. Rodriguez shook his head. They'll never accept those terms. Kozlov's smile was cold. Then we continue the war until they do. But we offer mercy one more time, not because they deserve it, but because we need to prove we're still capable of it. The vote was close, but it passed. Humanity would offer terms. One final chance for peace, but peace on humanity's terms this time. The message was sent to the Concordat High Council, along with a deadline. They had 30 days to respond, and while they waited for the answer, General Rodriguez prepared for the possibility that the answer would be no. The Concordat High Council chamber had stood for 7,000 years. Its walls were carved from a single piece of crystalline asteroid, brought from the homeworld of the first species to discover faster-than-light travel. Those walls had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, the formation of alliances, and the making of laws that governed trillions of beings. Never before had those walls witnessed such fear. High Mediator Zalthor stood before the council, his body failing him at last. He was 374 years old, far beyond the natural lifespan of his species, kept alive only by medical technology that was growing less effective with each passing day. He had been the one to welcome humanity to the stars, and he had been the one to vote for their extermination. Now humanity's terms sat before him on a data tablet, and he knew that every word on it had been written in the blood of his mistakes. They demand complete demilitarization, the Keltar representative said, his voice shaking. They want us to reduce our combined military forces by 90% within 5 years. They want control of all weapons research. They want the right to inspect any facility without warning. It's a surrender, another counselor said. Total absolute surrender. It's survival, Zalthor replied quietly. They could have exterminated us. They have the capability now. Instead, they offer terms. Harsh terms, but terms nonetheless. And if we refuse? A Zarath counselor asked. No one answered because they all knew. If they refused, humanity would return with fire and fury. The Ghost War would end and total war would begin. The Concordat might win through sheer numbers, but the cost would be measured in trillions of lives. There's more, Zalthor continued, scrolling through the terms. They demand reparations. Every species that participated in the human cleansing must pay into a fund for human survivors. They demand war crimes trials for all commanders involved in the genocide. They demand the ruins of Proxima Centauri be declared a protected memorial site. And they demand the creation of a new governing body, one where species cannot vote to exterminate each other, enforced by human military power. They want to rule us, someone said bitterly. No, Zalthor corrected. They want to ensure we never rule them again. There's a difference. The debate continued for 3 days. Some species wanted to fight, convinced that humanity's forces were smaller than they appeared, that it was all psychological warfare and tricks. Others wanted to accept the terms immediately, terrified of what would happen if they didn't. On the second day, a Vorath delegation arrived at the council chambers. They were led by High Commander Zeknar, who had surrendered his species weeks before. He stood before the council, his mandibles trembling, his body language showing submission in a way no Vorath had ever displayed to another species. My species will accept these terms, Zeknar announced. We will reduce our military. We will pay reparations. We will submit our commanders for trial. We do this not because we are forced to, but because it is right. We committed genocide. We deserve punishment. His words shocked the council. The Vorath had been the most militaristic species in the Concordat, feared and respected for their strength. Seeing them broken like this made the reality clear. Humanity had won not just militarily but psychologically. On the third day, the council voted. It was not unanimous. 5 species voted against acceptance, believing they could still fight. But 39 species voted yes, including some of the most powerful. The terms were accepted. When the message reached Sanctuary Prime, Admiral Kozlov read it in silence. She was in her office, the same space she had worked from for over a century. Around her were holographic images of Earth before the genocide, pictures of worlds that no longer existed. "We won," General Rodriguez said from the doorway. "After 100 years, we actually won." Kozlov turned to look at him. "Did we? Look at what we had to become to get here." "Look at what we sacrificed." Rodriguez moved into the room and poured them both drinks from a bottle of actual Earth whiskey, salvaged from the ruins of the homeworld years ago. "We survived. That's what matters. Our people live. Our children will grow up free." "Our children grew up learning hate," Kozlov replied. "We taught them to be weapons. Can we teach them to be human again?" "We'll find out." Rodriguez raised his glass. "To the dead. May they rest knowing we didn't let them down." They drank in silence. But the war was not quite over. 5 species had voted against the terms: the Krelnax, the Vothnar, the Zektian cluster, the Mortal Hives, and the Resheval Union. They believed humanity was bluffing, that the human forces were stretched too thin to enforce their demands. They learned the truth over the next 18 months. The Krelnax were an aquatic species that controlled 37 water worlds. They had voted for the human cleansing enthusiastically, believing that dry land species were inferior. When they refused the surrender terms, humanity responded with surgical precision. Human ships appeared in orbit above each Krelnax world simultaneously. They did not bombard the planets. Instead, they deployed atmospheric processors that began extracting moisture from the air. Within hours, the humidity on those worlds dropped from 90% to 40%. The Krelnax, adapted to high moisture environments, began to suffocate. The message that accompanied the action was simple: accept the terms, or we'll turn your oceans to deserts. You have 24 hours. The Krelnax accepted within 6 hours. The Vothnar were insectoids similar to the Vorath, but even more aggressive. They controlled a military fleet that numbered over 10,000 ships. When they refused the terms, they launched a massive counteroffensive against human forces. General Rodriguez personally led the defense. His fleet of 800 ships met the Vothnar armada in open space, and the battle began. But it wasn't a fair fight. Human ships used the Exodus engine to blink in and out of space, appearing behind enemy vessels, firing and vanishing before the Vothnar could respond. The battle lasted 3 weeks. By the end, the Vothnar had lost their entire fleet. Not destroyed, captured, 10,000 ships taken intact, their crews imprisoned. It was a demonstration of absolute superiority. When the Vothnar government received images of their entire military force floating dead in space, they surrendered. The remaining 3 species fell in similar fashion. The Zektian cluster had their trading networks completely destroyed, their economy crashing within weeks. The Mortal Hives found their worlds infiltrated by Reaper teams that systematically disabled their infrastructure. The Resheval Union simply woke up one day to find every single one of their military commanders had been arrested in a simultaneous operation across 200 worlds. Each time, humanity offered the same message: accept the terms. This is your last chance. Each time they accepted. By the end of the year 2498, 108 years after the betrayal, every species of the former Concordat had accepted human terms. The war was over. The peace negotiations took place on Proxima Centauri, not on the surface, which was still a radioactive wasteland, but in orbit where humanity had constructed a massive station. They called it the Memorial, and its walls were inscribed with the names of every human who had died in the genocide. Representatives from all 47 Concordat species arrived to sign the treaty. They walked through corridors lined with images of the worlds they had destroyed, past monuments to the billions they had killed. It was deliberate, a reminder of why they were here. Admiral Sarah Kozlov presided over the ceremony. She was now 155 years old. and her doctors had told her she had perhaps 3 months left to live. She had refused all life-extending treatments beyond that point, saying she had lived long enough. As each species representative signed the treaty, Kozlov called them by name and species. When High Commander Zeknar of the Vorath approached, she met his eyes. "Your father led the attack on Proxima," she said quietly. "I know," Zeknar replied, "and I supported it. I believed humans were weak. I was wrong about everything." Kozlov studied him for a long moment. "You surrendered before we broke you. You admitted guilt without being forced. That takes courage most of your species lacks." "It takes desperation," Zeknar corrected. "We were terrified." "Good." Kozlov's expression softened slightly. "But you also did the right thing when you could have kept fighting. That matters. Your species will be judged harshly in history, but your actions may allow them some redemption." Zeknar signed the treaty with trembling hands. The Vorath, who had led the call for human extermination, were the first to accept the new order. When High Mediator Zalthor approached to sign, he could barely walk. Like Kozlov, he was at the end of his life. He looked at the woman he had betrayed all those years ago. "I owe you an explanation," he said. "You owe me nothing but your signature," Kozlov replied coldly. "Nevertheless." Zalthor straightened as much as his failing body would allow. "When I met your Ambassador Chen Wei all those years ago, I thought I saw weakness. I thought humanity was too emotional, too idealistic, too naive to survive in the galaxy. I thought exterminating you was simply practical, necessary. I never imagined you could become what you became." "You never imagined victims could become predators," Kozlov said. "You never imagined the peaceful could become violent when pushed far enough. That was your mistake." Zalthor signed the treaty. "For what it's worth, if I had known what humanity would become, I would have left you alone." "If you had left us alone, we never would have become this," Kozlov replied. "We would have remained the species that offered friendship. You made us into something else. You have only yourself to blame for that." The treaty, officially named the Terran Accord, established a new galactic order. The old Concordat was dissolved. In its place came a system where every species had equal representation, where no species could be designated for extermination, and where violations would be met with human enforcement. Humanity would not rule the galaxy, but they would police it. Their fleets would ensure peace, not through diplomacy, but through the promise of overwhelming force against any aggressor. The Vorath homeworld of Krathnor became the first test of the new system. As part of their reparations, the Vorath were required to rebuild one of the human worlds they had destroyed. They chose New Harmony, the farming colony where 50 million had died. Thousands of Vorath workers came to the ruined planet and began the slow process of reconstruction. They worked alongside human survivors, many of whom had lost families on that world. The interactions were tense, sometimes violent, but slowly something unexpected happened. Understanding. The Vorath workers saw the devastation they had caused up close. They worked in the shadows of destroyed homes, found the remains of children in the ruins. Some broke down. Some became angry at their own species. Some, like High Commander Zeknar, who volunteered to work on the project himself, found something like repentance. Dr. Marcus Webb traveled to New Harmony to observe the reconstruction. He was 137 years old now. His body kept functional by the Genesis treatments he had designed. He walked through the ruins of a school, watching Vorath workers carefully reconstructing it brick by brick. One of the workers approached him hesitantly. Through a translator, the Vorath said, "I have offspring, 3 of them. When I see these destroyed schools, I imagine my children dying here. I cannot understand how my species did this." Webb looked at the Vorath, seeing genuine remorse in its body language. He thought of his own children, dead for over a century now, and felt something unexpected. Not forgiveness, but perhaps the possibility of it someday. "Your species can never undo what was done," Webb said, "but you can choose to be better going forward. You can make sure it never happens again." The Vorath worker nodded. "We will try. It is all we can do now." Colonel Sarah Chen, now General Chen and commander of humanity's enforcement fleets, visited Earth for the first time since the genocide. The planet was slowly recovering, its atmosphere being cleaned, its oceans being repopulated. It would take centuries before Earth could support large populations again, but the work had begun. She stood in the ruins of Beijing, where Ambassador Chen Wei had been born 200 years ago. A monument stood there now, listing the names of the 16 billion humans who had died in the cleansing. "Do you think they would be proud of us?" her second officer asked. "The dead. Do you think they would approve of what we became?" Chen was quiet for a long time. "I think they would understand. When you're being murdered, you don't care about morality. You care about survival. We survived. That's what matters, but at what cost?" Chen turned to look at her officer, a young woman born after the genocide, part of the generation that had grown up in the dark. "The cost was our innocence. We can never be the species we were before. We can never go back to being the humans who offered friendship without suspicion, but maybe our children can. Maybe their children can. That's what we're fighting for now." General James Rodriguez retired from active service in the year 2499. He was 142 years old, and the Genesis treatments could only do so much. His body was failing, not from age but from the accumulated damage of a century of combat. He established the Academy of Reapers on a moon orbiting Jupiter. It would train the next generation of enhanced soldiers, but Rodriguez insisted on one critical difference. These new Reapers would learn not just how to fight, but when not to fight. "We created weapons because we needed weapons," he told the first class of students. "But a weapon without wisdom is just a tool for making the same mistakes our enemies made. You will be the guardians of the new order. That means knowing when to show mercy as much as knowing when to show force." One student, a young man named Marcus Webb Jr., grandson of the famous scientist, raised his hand. "Sir, how do we know the difference? How do we know when to be merciful and when to be deadly?" Rodriguez smiled grimly. "You learn. You make mistakes. You live with the consequences. Just like we did. Just like every generation before you." He paused. "But you start with this principle. Violence is the last option, not the first. We forgot that once. It almost destroyed us. Don't make the same mistake." Admiral Sarah Kozlov died 3 weeks after the signing of the Terran Accord. She passed peacefully in her sleep on Sanctuary Prime, surrounded by the people she had led through the darkest century of human history. Her funeral was attended by representatives from every species in the former Concorda. Even the Vorath sent a delegation, led by High Commander Zeknar. It was the first time in galactic history that so many species gathered to honor a single individual. General Rodriguez gave the eulogy. He stood before the assembled crowd, looking at the simple casket that contained the woman who had saved humanity. "Admiral Kozlov once asked me if we were still human," Rodriguez said. "After everything we'd done, everything we'd become, she wondered if the Concordat had succeeded in killing humanity, just more slowly than they intended." I didn't have an answer for her then. I'm not sure I have one now. He looked around at the gathered species, at the humans who had survived, at the monuments to the dead. "But I know this. Sarah Kozlov spent the last 108 years of her life ensuring that humanity survived. Not just physically, but as an idea. She could have turned us into conquerors. She could have made us into the very thing the Concordat feared. Instead, she gave us a choice. She let us decide what kind of species we wanted to be in victory." Rodriguez's voice grew stronger. "We chose to offer mercy a second time, not because our enemies deserved it, but because we needed to prove we could still choose mercy. That choice, more than any battle, more than any weapon, is what makes us human." Admiral Kozlov understood that. She lived it. And she leaves us with the responsibility of continuing it. The funeral ended with a moment of silence. Then, one by one, the representatives from the former Concordat species approached Kozlov's casket. Many left tokens of respect, some left apologies. The Vorath delegation left a piece of crystal from their homeworld, inscribed with words in human English. "We will remember. We will never forget. We will be better." In the year 2500, exactly 110 years after the betrayal, the new galactic government officially formed. It was called the Terran Covenant, and its founding document began with a simple statement: "No species shall raise their hand against another for the purpose of extinction. Those who attempt genocide shall face the full force of unified galactic justice." Earth was still recovering, but humanity had established new colonies across 50 star systems. The population had grown to 9 billion, still far below the pre-genocide numbers but growing steadily. Children were born who would never know the terror of the dark years. who would grow up in a galaxy that feared and respected humanity in equal measure. Dr. Marcus Webb, now the oldest living human at 138, was asked to speak at the founding ceremony. He stood before the gathered representatives, his enhanced body still strong despite his age, and spoke words he had never imagined saying. "I spent 100 years learning how to hurt people," Webb said. "I created biological weapons tailored to cause maximum suffering. I modified human genetics to create soldiers who could kill without hesitation. I did these things because my wife and children were murdered, and I wanted revenge." He paused, looking around at the assembled species. "I got that revenge. We all did. The species that destroyed our worlds now fear us. They pay reparations. They submit to our laws. We won." Webb's expression was difficult to read. "But my wife and children are still dead. Revenge didn't bring them back. It just gave me something to focus on besides grief. Now that the revenge is over, I'm left with the question, what do I do with the rest of my life?" He straightened and his voice grew firmer. "I've decided to spend it building instead of destroying. I'm going to use my knowledge of genetics to help species adapt to new worlds, to cure diseases, to make life better instead of ending it. Because that's what my wife would have wanted. That's what my children would have wanted." Webb looked directly at the Vorath delegation. "Some of you committed terrible crimes. You can never undo them, but you can choose what you do next. You can choose to build a better galaxy. That choice is what will define you going forward, not what you did in the past." The ceremony ended with the signing of the Covenant Charter. Every species representative signed, including the humans. The document was then sealed in a monument on Proxima Centauri, at the site where the first bombardment had fallen. It would stand as a reminder of what had happened and what must never happen again. Lisa Park, now the head of the Terran Covenant's Technology Division, began a project to develop faster-than-light communication that could connect the entire galaxy. "If we can talk to each other instantly across any distance, maybe we can prevent misunderstandings from becoming wars," she explained to the Council. The project took 5 years, but when it was completed, every world in the Covenant had access to instantaneous communication. For the first time in galactic history, species could resolve disputes through conversation rather than violence. But not everyone was happy with the new order. There were humans who believed the concordate species had gotten off too easily. That mercy was a mistake. There were concordate species who resented human dominance and plotted resistance. The galaxy was not suddenly peaceful, it was just differently violent. In the year 2505, a group of human extremists calling themselves the True Reapers attempted to destroy the Vorath homeworld. They believed the Vorath deserved extinction for what they had done to humanity. They stole a human warship and prepared to bombard Krathnor just as the Vorath had bombarded Proxima. General Chen, commanding the enforcement fleet, intercepted them. The standoff lasted 3 days, with the extremists threatening to fire if anyone approached. Chen finally opened a communication channel. "I understand your anger. I lost my entire family on Proxima. I spent 100 years wanting revenge. But if we do this, if we commit genocide because genocide was committed against us, then we're no different from them. We become what they feared we were. They deserve it," the extremist leader shouted. "They murdered billions." "Yes, they did," Chen agreed. "And we made them pay. We broke them. We forced them to submit, but we stopped short of exterminating them. Because that's what separates us from them. That's what makes us human. If you fire those weapons, you're not avenging the dead. You're just creating more ghosts." The standoff ended when the extremists surrendered. They were tried and imprisoned, and the Vorath government publicly thanked General Chen for preventing the attack. It was a strange moment, former enemies acknowledging each other's restraint. High Commander Zeknar sent a personal message to Chen. "You saved my world. I cannot express adequate gratitude. Know that the Vorath will remember this. We will prove ourselves worthy of the mercy you have shown." By the year 2510, 20 years after the war ended, the galaxy had settled into a new normal. Trade resumed between species. Cultural exchanges happened. Some humans even visited former concordate worlds as tourists. The healing was slow and painful, but it was happening. A young human girl named Sarah, named after Admiral Kozlov, attended a school on a colony world where Vorath children also studied. The classroom was mixed, human and Vorath learning together. One day, a Vorath student asked Sarah about the genocide. "My grandfather was a soldier in the war. the Vorath child said through a translator. He tells me about the terrible things his generation did. I don't understand why they thought killing was right. Sarah thought about the question. She had learned the history, seen the recordings, visited the memorials. My teacher says sometimes people do terrible things because they're afraid. Your species was afraid humans would become strong enough to challenge them, so they tried to destroy us first. But you survived, the Vorath child said, and you became strong anyway. Yes, Sarah agreed. We became strong, but we also became sad. Lots of people died. Humans and Vorath both. The war hurt everyone. The Vorath child was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry your people died. I'm sorry your people had to do it, Sarah replied. It was a child's understanding, simple and direct, but it was a start. Dr. Marcus Webb lived to see his 150th birthday. He spent his final years on Earth watching the planet slowly return to life. He walked through reconstructed cities and saw children playing in parks that had been craters. He saw forests growing where deserts had been. On his last day, Webb sat in a garden overlooking where Beijing had once stood. His grandson sat with him, the young Marcus who had become a reaper but was now studying medicine. Did we make the right choices? The old man asked. After everything, did we do the right thing? Young Marcus considered the question. You survived. You saved humanity. You showed the galaxy that we're not to be trifled with. I think that's about as right as anyone could have done. But at what cost? Webb asked the eternal question. At the cost of innocence, his grandson replied. But maybe innocence was always going to be the price of survival. Maybe you can't keep your innocence and your life when someone's trying to take both. Webb smiled. You're wiser than I was at your age. I had better teachers, the young man replied. You showed us how to be strong. Now we're learning how to be good again. That's the legacy you're leaving us. Webb closed his eyes, content. He died peacefully that evening. The last of the generation that had witnessed the betrayal firsthand. In the year 2525, 53 years after the war ended, a memorial was unveiled on Earth. It stood at the exact location where Ambassador Chen Wei had first prepared to meet the Concordat representatives. The monument was simple, a statue of a human and an alien shaking hands with an inscription below. The inscription read, "We tried peace. They chose war. We mastered it. Now we offer peace again on our terms. May all species remember, mercy is not weakness. It is strength held in check. But that strength is always there, always ready, always watching. Choose wisely." Delegates from every species in the Terran Covenant attended the unveiling. They stood together, human and alien, former enemies now bound by law and mutual survival. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. Maybe it would never be forgiveness, but it was coexistence. It was a chance. An old Vorath, one of the last who had fought in the war, approached a human veteran. Through a translator, the Vorath said, "We made you into weapons. That is our greatest shame." The human veteran, a woman who had lost everyone she loved on Proxima, looked at the alien for a long moment. "You didn't make us into weapons. You revealed the weapons we always were. Humans are dangerous when threatened. You just didn't realize that until it was too late." "And now?" the Vorath asked. "What are humans now?" The woman smiled grimly. "Now we're the ones who make sure no one else has to learn what we learned. We're the guardians. We're the ones who enforce the rules. And we're the ones who'll burn your worlds to ashes if you ever forget what happened last time you tried to exterminate someone." It wasn't a friendly conversation, but it was honest, and honesty was better than the lies that had led to genocide. The ceremony ended with a moment of silence for all who had died. 16 billion humans, 107 million Concordat military personnel who had died in the war, countless others who had suffered and survived. Then, as the sun set over Earth's recovering surface, a child stepped forward. She was human, 10 years old, born long after the war. She carried a candle and placed it at the base of the monument. "This is for everyone who died," she said simply. "Human and alien. They're all dead because people forgot that peace is better than war. We won't forget again." Other children followed, human and alien both, each placing a candle. Soon the monument was surrounded by light, hundreds of small flames pushing back the darkness. And in that moment, standing among the lights and the memories, humanity and the galaxy made a silent promise. Never again. Not to humanity. Not to anyone. The age of genocides was over. The galaxy would remember Proxima Centauri. They would remember Earth burning. They would remember what happened when you pushed humanity too far.